Hello everybody and welcome to a new type of video on the Always Wolves channel. Today I'm going to be joined by a special guest and we're going to go through the game week 1 match days, and me and the guest will be predicting the results. And this could be a series that could carry on over the course of the season if you guys like it and would like to see more. And it could be with a variety of guests and hosts. So it might be that Dave hosts a few and he's joined by somebody else. Or it could be that we carry on with me and a variety of the guests that you're used to seeing on the Always Wolves channel. So let's introduce my guest. Here he is. It's my brother Lucas. He's often on the podcast, but never really at the same time as me. So hello, Lucas. How are you?
Hello, Lewis. I'm okay. How are you?
Good. I'm all good. How are you feeling to be on this new type of video?
I'm really excited to see how it progresses through the season, to see if the
Yeah.
fans of Always Wolves like it, and hopefully it's a new addition that Always Wolves can continue.
Yeah, and obviously for game week 1, it's the start of the new Premier League season. There's always a lot of excitement. If you have to pick one game that you're really excited for, other than obviously the Wolves game against Arsenal on Saturday at 3 o'clock, which game are you most looking forward to in game week 1?
I'd have to say Man United and Fulham just to kick-start the season, or even Chelsea, Man City, because it's going to be good to see how both teams set up.
Yeah, so both games either starting the game week with Man United and Fulham and finishing off the game week with Chelsea and Man City, which is at 4:30 on Sunday. So, Lucas, we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to get straight into it. Why don't you start with telling me how you think the Man United Fulham's game is going to go on Friday, the 16th of August?
I think it's going to be a home victory for Manchester United, with Manchester United coming out with a 2-1 victory against Fulham.
Okay. And if I had to push you for a goal scorer for either side, would you be able to give me one?
I think for Man United, I think Fernandes might get a goal, and for Fulham, I think Rodrigo Muniz.
Okay, so maybe some FPL tips there as well from you, Lucas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. For me, I think that Lucas is definitely along the right lines. I think that Man United, I expect them to win, but I don't see Fulham lying down. And I think the first game is always a lot of excitement. There's a lot of there's a big atmosphere, especially at Old Trafford, one of the biggest stadiums in the country. Although it's not really that loud often because of the fans, they don't make too much of an atmosphere. But I think I'm going to go for a high scoring game. There's a lot of anticipation for this, the start of the new Premier League season. So I'm going to go 3-2 for Man United. I can see them just nicking it in the last minute, maybe. But I do see Fulham being quite a force this season. I expect them to do really well. So, yeah, I can definitely see them causing a few problems for Man United. Okay, so on to Saturday's fixtures, Lucas. It starts with a 12:30 kickoff. Ipswich v Liverpool. Of course, the 12:30 kickoffs Jurgen Klopp used to hate, and now Liverpool have a 12:30 in their first game without Jurgen Klopp. So, how do you see newly promoted Ipswich faring against Liverpool, who did so well? They were first in the table last season for a big chunk of the season and just fell off towards the end of the season. What do you think the score is going to be in that game?
I think it's going to be a big game for both, because Ipswich have to prove that they're an established Premier League club, so they have to push and push. But Liverpool have to show teams that they've got the new manager in Armory Slot, and they have to push and show that they're still going to be a top club without Jurgen Klopp. So both teams have points to show, so therefore I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting one. There's always that idea around the early kickoff can always throw up a lot of surprises. And obviously, as you said, Ipswich they're back in the Premier League. They're here to try and prove themselves and show, look, we can establish ourselves in the league. But on the other hand, as you said, Liverpool have got that challenge of moving on from such an important manager in their club's past now. And, we saw the last time, I'd say, that kind of manager, although not on the same level, the last time a manager left the club in the same way that maybe Klopp did, obviously, was Alex Ferguson when he left Man United. I think that could be the same impact for the club. And we saw how, it's taken Man United a lot of time to stabilise themselves. So Liverpool will be hoping to avoid that and really get stabilised as soon as possible under Arne Slot. So I think it will be another really interesting game in game week 1. So yeah, if I had to push you for a goal scorer, who would score in that game?
I think Salah maybe will get one, and I think Nunez will get the other for Liverpool.
Okay, that's great. And again, as Lucas said, he obviously predicted a 2-2 draw. it is always so tricky to predict the 12:30 kickoff. If you see on a Saturday, there's going to be one game that you expect a surprise result. It often is that 12:30 game, the early kickoff. So I'm not going to go for a draw, though. I expect Liverpool to win, but I don't expect it to be comfortable for them down at Portman Road. So I'm going to go 2-1. I think it'll be a bit, definitely a Liverpool win, but not a runaway victory. I don't expect that, but of course I could be wrong. Lucas, we're now into the game for us Wolves fans. Arsenal Wolves. It's obviously the first game for Gary O'Neill in his second season at the club. First, actually, after having a pre-season at the Emirates, Arsenal got a big point to prove this season to see if they can go that one step further and try and win that Premier League title. How do you see this one going?
Well, I think Wolves fans are going with unconfident heads going into this game, especially how we played against RB Rayo Vallecano, sorry.
Yeah.
So therefore, I think Wolves might surprise us depending on the formation we come out with. So I think it might be a 2-1 to Arsenal victory.
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate, obviously, if you saw on Sunday night on the podcast about how Gary should set up his system, whether he should stick with the back five, especially in games against the big sides, or if he should trust his own ideas about moving to a back four, even in the big matches. So I think it will be interesting to see the system that Gary deploys on Saturday, because, yeah, this is a tough test against Arsenal. My prediction on Sunday night was, I think it was 3-1, and that's the one I'm going to stick with. If I had to give a goal scorer for Wolves, if he plays, I think Cunha will score, and yeah, that's my prediction for that. On to Everton v Brighton. Obviously, a really interesting game because Brighton, with a new manager as well, Everton finished the season fairly strongly. And I saw actually on the table last season, if they didn't have their points deducted, how much higher they would have been up. I think it was easy to overlook Everton as having a bad season. They actually had a really strong season, Everton. So Lucas, and obviously they've been able to retain key players like Jared Branthwaite, who was linked away. Lucas, how do you see that one going?
I think Brighton have to prove themselves with the new manager, of course. Set a good standards for Brighton, as well as Liverpool doing that. So I think it's going to be a tough game. Goodison Park's a tough place to go, especially on the first game of the season. The fans get behind them to push them for the season. So therefore, I think it's going to be a 1-0 to Everton.
1-0 Everton, and obviously they had such a strong defence last season as well. I think they had, they may have had one of the highest clean sheet tallies at the end of the season last year. So I definitely see it being tough for Brighton, but it's always interesting with a new manager. There's not that much footage to go off, and especially being such a young manager as the new Brighton coach is. I'm going to go in that game 1-1. I see Brighton having enough to score, but I do think Everton will make it really tricky. And as you said, that Goodison Park atmosphere in what will be their last season at that stadium, I think it's going to be a really special one for Everton. And like Fulham, I do expect Everton to be mid-table at least this season. So, Lucas, we're now on to Newcastle, Southampton. Southampton obviously promoted again to the Premier League. Newcastle are on the back of a bit of a disappointing season last year with the Champions League. How do you see this one going?
I think it's going to be a tough game. Whenever Newcastle play Southampton, it's really close game. I can remember a few from a few years ago. So I think Newcastle, obviously St James's Park, excellent atmosphere. Bit far for Southampton fans, so they probably won't make.
I think that's probably the longest journey in the league.
Yeah, so therefore probably the away fans won't travel in good numbers. That means not a good atmosphere. But if they do, it's still high up for them to make some noise. So therefore, I think Newcastle win 3-1.
3-1, not a bad prediction. I think you are right, Lucas. I think even though it's the first game of the season, I don't know how many Southampton fans will travel. I find it hard to imagine them filling out their 3,000 capacity at St James's Park in the away end, in the gods, as everybody knows. I think you could be right that lack of support and the hostile atmosphere at St James's Park is it's probably one of the best atmospheres in the league. And I think Newcastle have a point to prove this season that they are still on track to continue the successes that they had in the season before last. So I'm going to also go for a Newcastle win, and I'm going to go 3-0. Lucas, on to Nottingham Forest v Bournemouth. What's your opinion on that game?
I think it's going to be tough for Bournemouth now because they've just lost their talisman, Dominic Solanke, to go to Tottenham. So it's going to be a really tough game for them. But they're just going to have to plod on, as they say in football terms. And they're going to have to find a new talisman that can get scoring goals that Dominic Solanke would score. Obviously, Nuno at Forest, we know what wonders Nuno can work. He was a great manager for us, and he's doing a good job at Forest, kept them up, even with a points deduction. So it's going to be a really close game. I remember Nuno's first game was against Bournemouth, and it was a close game. So I think it's going to be a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, and I think that, as you said, Lucas, Nuno has done a great job keeping Forest up, especially with the points deduction. Equally as good of a job as Everton. Obviously not to the same extent on the points deduction, but Everton, you'd argue that Everton probably had a bit of a stronger side. So the job is obviously a little bit easier for Sean Dyche. But yeah, we all know about Nuno's quality as a manager. And I definitely think that Solanke will be a big miss, despite the good business that Bournemouth have done in the transfer market. They've moved really quick on some of their signings. It was almost as if they were expecting Solanke to leave by going in heavy in the market, spending money before they'd gained any. So they, when negotiating with other clubs, it wasn't as if, the other clubs could say, well, we know you've got this much money because you've just sold Solanke. They got their business done early, and now they've got their money back on those signings. So yeah, I think it will be a big miss for Bournemouth, despite their good work that they've done in the transfer market. So I'm going to go 2-1 for Forest. And Lucas, if I have to ask you for a goal scorer in that game, can I have one?
Chris Wood. He's worked wonders with Nuno last season. So I think Nuno can push him this season and get a few more out of him. So therefore, I think he can get one goal, especially against Bournemouth.
Yeah, okay. And this is the 5:30 kickoff now, West Ham v Aston Villa. Now, I think for me, this is probably the fixture I'm most interested about, because I find this one really interesting, because obviously West Ham, a bit of a disappointing year in their fans' eyes, under David Moyes last year, and he's obviously left the club now, replaced by former Wolves boss Julian Lopetegui. I think that Aston Villa, obviously, they were fantastic last year. They've got that Champions League place, as Newcastle did the season before. And we all know the impact it had on Newcastle, having to think about that and consider that when playing and competing in the Premier League. I think this game, I find it really hard to predict how it's going to go either way, because even though West Ham were a little bit disappointing last season, the money that they've spent and the quality they've brought in is undeniable. They're definitely a much better side than they were at the start of the window. And obviously Julian will like that. We all know how he feels about transfer business and how it should and shouldn't be done. But on the other hand, Aston Villa, they've managed to retain the quality of their players. They've obviously sold a few. Diaby obviously has moved to Saudi Arabia. But I think the quality of Aston Villa's squad is still there. And I don't see them being troubled with fatigue or concern about the Champions League at the start of the season. So, Lucas, with all that in mind, can I have your prediction for the West Ham-Aston Villa game on the Saturday night football?
I think it's going to be a tough game. As you've mentioned, Villa getting Champions League, it's going to be tough. West Ham with a new manager as well. So they've got to prove a point as well as the other two teams that have got new managers. So I think it's going to be a close game because both teams want a good start, as everyone does in the league. So, in fact, do the score, I'll say a 1-1.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly the score I'd go with too. So I'm going to go 1-1. And I'm going to hope Watkins scores, as I have got him in my FPL. And I would really appreciate the points. On to Sunday's fixtures. Obviously, Brentford v Crystal Palace. Now, this one is a bit of it's a London derby. Obviously, it's not too intense of a rivalry, but it is a derby in terms of London terms. Crystal Palace, at the minute, they're under a lot of pressure to sell Mark Gay to Newcastle, and Fulham are interested in signing their other really good centre half, Joachim Anderson. What are your thoughts on on Brentford and Crystal Palace on that game at 2:00 on the Sunday?
I think it's going to be a tough game, as you mentioned. Crystal Palace. Mark Gay is considered to be going to Newcastle, so therefore he might be ended up going. So it depends all on that really, because Mark Gay is a wonderful player who was at the Euros, did really well. Brentford also have a strong squad with Tony coming back, obviously, having his first restart to the season after his betting ban coming in place. So therefore, I think Tony's going to get a goal, and it's going to be a 2-1 Palace.
2-1 Palace. Yeah, I think you are right. As long as Gay and Anderson are in that game, I think Palace just have too much quality, and obviously they've lost players like Elise, who's moved on to Bayern Munich. But I think the quality of Palace's squad is undeniable. And I think even though Brentford have also signed some players like Carvalho from Liverpool, which is a great signing, I think that quality will just be a bit too much for Brentford. I also expect it to be 2-1. And now onto the kind of headline game of the week, the game week 1, Chelsea v Man City at Stamford Bridge. Now, this fixture last season finished 4-4. Do you expect that many goals this time around, Lucas?
Not this early in the season, no. I think both teams are going to ease it in to the season. Both teams have, Man City have one of the best goal scorers in the Premier League's history in Erling Haaland. Just lost their backup striker in Julian Alvarez going to Atletico Madrid. So he's going to be a big miss in case Haaland gets injured or suspended. So it's going to be a big miss, but I think Man City can plod on with the victory. But with Chelsea having so many players and that much squad depth, it's going to be hard for Man City to plan on what team Chelsea could come with, as there's so many players that can play in that positions. For now, 7 goalkeepers, I think. So they've got to predict what players are going to be playing where and how they're going to be playing. If it's quick play or high tempo, they just have to try and prepare for all different scenarios. So I'm going to, as I said, Man City are going to come out the winners, and I think it's going to be 2-1 Man City with Pedro Neto scoring for Chelsea.
Yeah, and you made a lot of good points there, Lucas. Obviously, Pep has mentioned that the quality players that Man City have, their best players, Phil Foden, the likes of those, Kyle Walker, they won't be in the squad and they're unlikely to feature this early on in the season. So I think that point you made about easing in and kind of a bit more relaxed style of play from Pep, it definitely could come true. I think that prediction is definitely fair. And obviously you mentioned about Chelsea's squad depth. It's so hard to predict who's going to play where because, as you said, they have so many players. And obviously, we mentioned it a couple of times with obviously Brighton and Liverpool with a new manager. Chelsea also have Enzo Maresca as their new manager. It's hard to predict exactly how they're going to play. They obviously played against each other in pre-season, which I think that game also, that game was 4-2. So they'll have a bit of an idea, but you are right. I think, Lucas, when it's competitive football, we're seeing exactly what, how the managers would like to play, or they've at least told the players exactly how they'd like to play. Whether that translates to actual play is another thing, but I think you are right, definitely on that. And I don't expect it to be as open as the pre-season game. I don't expect a 4-4 as it was last season at Stamford Bridge. So I'm going to go 2-1 also. I think Palmer, I think for me, he was one of the best players at the Euros. He found it was almost as if he found a new level above what he was playing at Chelsea, at the back in the Euros. And every time he came on, he just looked so good and so sharp. And as long as he's kept that sharpness, I think he'll definitely score. And he'll have that motivation to, obviously, against his former club, former manager. But I think Man City, they just always have that bit more than everybody else. They're just that bit better. And I think Man City will definitely walk away victorious, in my opinion, and definitely 2-1. And obviously, there's one more game which is just out of the picture there. It's Leicester v Tottenham. Now, Lucas, Tottenham had a bit of a disappointing end to the season last season. They obviously started quite strongly, and things were looking really bright under Ange Postecoglou. How do you think they'll fare at the King Power on the opening day?
Stay with the Ipswich Liverpool game. It's a newly promoted team at home, so the fans are going to be getting behind the players no matter what's happening. This game likes to bring goals, so I think it's going to be a high-scoring contest, especially with Leicester fans. How loud they are. Well, when on their day, they can be really loud.
Yeah.
A good atmosphere. So I think it might be a 2-1 Leicester win.
2-1 Leicester. Wow, it's a bit of a shock there. I mean, yeah, I definitely agree. I think Leicester maybe have a bit more of an incentive to kind of establish themselves in the league, because obviously, if you they don't want to become a yo-yo side. Obviously, being relegated a couple of seasons ago and getting promoted this season, they will want to make sure they remain in the league this season under Steve Cooper. Do you think that Steve Cooper will be able to keep them in the league, Lucas?
Yeah, Steve Cooper did an immense job at Nottingham Forest before his departure. And he has the capabilities of keeping any side up. In my opinion, he's a great manager. He's got a great style of play, and he puts that in how he wants to play early. I saw one game in pre-season, and you could see that was wanting to play. With Cody at the back, they have a great leader. He's now their captain, I think. And they've got great leaders in and around the club, like Jamie Vardy, Connor Cody. So it's going to be a good chance for Steve Cooper to see what he likes and how he wants to play. So therefore, I think he's going to keep them up, and it's going to be quite safe for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the point about Steve Cooper. He has an idea of how he wants to play, and he does stick to it. And I think at the end at Forest, it just kind of maybe his stubbornness just kind of contributed to him getting sacked, because the fans loved him there. And you know, obviously the owner at Forest, everybody knows about him, how he's quite erratic sometimes, and if it's not going his way, he does get quite emotional, which is always good from an owner. You want that, you want passion. But yeah, I think you are right about Steve Cooper. He has got a brand of football, and you know, it kept Forest in the league when they were first promoted. And if he was given the chance to finish the season off last year, maybe he would have kept them up again. So yeah, I definitely think Leicester will stay up this season. But I think Tottenham, with the new striker that I thought they were lacking last season in Solanke, you've already mentioned in Lucas, obviously talking about Bournemouth. I think Tottenham will have just too much quality for Leicester, especially in forward areas. So I expect Tottenham to win 2-0 in that game. But that is the end of the fixtures for game week 1. Guys, if you have enjoyed this type of video, obviously with myself and Lucas, please do like and comment and just let us know. We're always Wolves, we're always looking to bring you the videos that you like the most, and always, you know, interested in trying new types of videos as we have today. If you would like the series to continue over the course of the season, either with myself as a host or with whoever from Always Wolves as a host, you know, again, do comment that. And until next time, Always Wolves.
Always Wolves.